Big Papa Pump let his pipe do the talking. Have fun on seeing that, by the way. I'm John Renton with the Retro Review of WCW Thunder from February 21st, 2001. And we're just about a month away from the end of this company, which is going to be very, very strange to look back on because it's hard to believe it's been nearly 20 fucking years. So we get recaps of the funeral bullshit for Kevin Nash, the career of Kevin Nash, much like they did for Goldberg right after Sin, because Flair's Magnificent Seven was taking out everybody systematically so they could, make WCW in their image. Unfortunately, they didn't get to do that because new ownership took over and basically just killed the goddamn company, and Bischoff's group was not able to acquire TV rights. Yeah, it was a big fucking mess. Would have been interesting to see what a reboot could have done, even if it wouldn't have lasted, it still would have been interesting. So, Shivani and Tanay on commentary, we get Kwee still wanting to be on Flair's team, and he offers an open challenge. Or he says to Flair, we'll regret not having the Kwee on his team. They really never gave him much consistency. He would just snap, beat up people, and that was it. And he faced Kaz Hayashi. It started hot. Kaz Hayashi did a good dive. Kwee did some good groundwork. He did miss a dive a little bit later. Going away from the groundwork was his undoing. He did counter a slingshot DDT. Got hit with a high kick, though, and then the slingshot DDT was hit by Kaz. 1, 2, 3. But Kwee was upset. You wouldn't like him when he's upset, or angry as it were. And he lays out Kaz with the pile driver. So, okay, so far, so typical of an episode of Thunder. Alex Wright is in catering, and Disco basically arrives, and he says, Disco, stay away from me. But Disco's like, you don't mean that. Come on, I used to have the Disco duck. Yes, get the duck. We love you, Scott Steiner. That was sadly one of the best things that ever happened with Disco, and Disco wasn't even on camera. It was Scott Steiner beating up Disco's duck with his pipe and not Disco himself. More in the pity. So, they're going to have a tag match later against two cruiserweights. Hugh Morris wants Rick Steiner, in the worst way, but also because of what he did to Lash LaRue, his former Misfits in Action partner. May I remind you that Misfits in Action, MIA, was a terrible fucking group. So, Scott shows up. You're not part of the new WCW. I'm going to break your back and your spirit. Then Rick attacks from behind. And he says, Rick, beat him up, but leave a little piece for me for later. Because we're getting Scott Steiner versus Hugh Morris in the main event. And then a bunch of guys show up to back up Hugh Morris. Chronic cruiserweights, not chronic cruiserweights, even though I'm sure some were probably on that, as was much of the roster, because you had to be on something to get through this bullshit. And then a couple of the former Natural Born Thrillers, because they got rid of that group. Like, the group was pretty much disbanded if not by this point, very soon after. Because, 4 members had fought over the WCW Tag Team Championships at Super Brawl Revenge. And Dustin as well. And Crowbar. It was very strange, because suddenly Hugh Morris was a de facto locker room leader, the heart of the WCW locker room. Which might explain why the company had no goddamn heart, because Hugh Morris, if you're going to hang your hat on Hugh Morris, you're doomed to fucking fail. So, Rick talks to Totally Buff and Canyon. They have respective matches tonight. And then Vito wants to find Johnny the Bull. Stasiak says, hey, have you checked where your sister is? He's probably banging your sister. Because Vito's sister gets around a lot. Vito didn't like that, and he beat up Stasiak. And Jindrak's like, wait, I'm reading my magazine. Shit, my partner's in trouble. I need to help with this. And a pull apart, and we're going to have a match between Vito and Stasiak later. So we get the Boogie Nights, Disco and Alex Wright versus AJ Styles and Air Paris, the Air Paris community. Yes, the Air Paris disagreement was much more of an agreement this time because they actually won. Disco Inferno out wrestling AJ Styles. And I don't care that Disco was the veteran at this point. AJ Styles, even at 23 goddamn years old, was still way better than Disco would have been on his best goddamn day. And Disco didn't have any best days. He only had worse days because Disco Inferno being involved in wrestling was fucking embarrassing. So, a crossbody by Styles pins Disco Inferno. And sadly, these guys would, cross paths briefly, I think, again in NWA TNA / Impact Wrestling. I know Disco hung around for a bit, but I don't remember if they had any matches. Just very strange that Disco Inferno managed to pop up in another wrestling company in some form or another. And especially recently, Impact Wrestling brought him in for a bit, and I don't fucking understand why. We get a Kid Romeo vignette. Alright? Kid Romeo, who didn't really get to do all that much WCW. Before it closed down. Who knows what else he would have done? Who knows what he did afterwards? I know he was in NWA TNA a little bit, I believe. Still trying to figure out what Kid Romeo ended up doing with his wrestling career, because I don't think it lasted long. So, Stasiak cuts a promo about both Huntsville, Alabama, because they were recording Thunder right after Nitro. So, yeah, it was taped the same goddamn night because they were trying to cut costs and nobody really cared about Thunder. He called Huntsville and New York disgusting, full rows of teeth. the typical stuff, and then face Vito in a match that was okay. There were quite a few near falls, a few too many big moves. Perfect Plex attempt, and that was just for 2. And then he hit a Rude Awakening 1, 2, 3. Kind of scary that at this point it was coming up on the 2-year anniversary of Rick Rude's unfortunate, untimely passing. And Stasiak beats Vito, beats him up a little bit afterwards. And then Crowbar talks about Jarrett's Dusty impression, how it was disgusting, that guys like Dusty and others paved the way for Jarrett to have a job, and Crowbar wants to show that he wants to get back to the veterans. Wasn't Crowbar just wrestling Terry Funk a little bit ago for the Hardcore Championship, saying he was washed up and stuff like this? Wasn't he just saying something like that? He was wrestling a guy that was his mentor, and then, oh, no, wait, I'm sorry. They were confusing all this stuff because it was Terry Funk wanting to take down the young guys. Nobody knew anything about consistent storytelling at this point, because WCW is just changing people left and right. Crowbar as a, underneath babyface wasn't the worst idea, but then he would have a match a little bit later. Hugh Morris, a little video package on him. Buff and Canyon, they cut varying promos, which weren't all that great, and then they took on Miller and DDP. It started off hot with the faces attacking. Heels took over for a while. They mocked Miller for Miss Jones being out, and then Miller gets in. Everybody get in here, and then Feeliner to Buff 1, 2, 3. Miller gets some revenge on Buff Bagwell. Jeff Jarrett versus Crowbar. Crowbar sure tried to make this interesting, but it's a Jeff Jarrett match in 2001, so that was like swimming upstream and then a bear catching you and ragdolling you. Yeah, pretty goddamn graphic there, but, he hurt his knee at one point, getting dumped over the top, and then got hit with the stroke 1, 2, 3. Dustin runs down and chases Jarrett to the back. Well, tries to. Jarrett already ran, and Dustin's like, okay, he's out of frame. I'm not going to do this anymore. Shane Douglas cuts a promo about wrestling and how Ric Flair is wrestling's biggest politician, references the stuff back in 1990. Hey, why didn't Rick watch my matches? I wanted to get better. I idolized Rick, and Rick played him. Shane hated him pretty much since then because he felt betrayed. And to be fair, I don't blame Shane at that time. The problem is Shane held on to a lot of shit. And then went to ECW, his return 2000, where Rick was happy to see him back, but he knew that it was fucking bullshit because Rick was still the politician. And that it's your cross to bear, and Shane has hated Rick ever since, at least for a lot of years after this. They were trying to make Shane Douglas a babyface, which was strange. Buff gets in O'Hara's face, they have a bit of a, a bit of a scuffle, and then Luger tries to talk, really tries to talk and fucking fails. Luger versus Palumbo, roles reverse, because remember when Palumbo was attacking Luger, and he used the Flexi Lexi bar, and was doing, all the stuff like the New Blood Millionaires Club thing, and it was shit? This was equally shit because Lex was older and even, and cared even less than he did before. Totally Buff getting a tag title shot at Greed. Luger got cocky, inside cradle 1, 2, 3. O'Hare stops Luger from beating him down further because O'Hare was banned from ringside, and Buff pulls Luger out just before he could get beat up more. Hugh Morris locks Animal and Rick Steiner in a locker room and then faces Scott Steiner, where eventually Rick and Animal escape, but a T-bone suplex off the ropes, and then Scott Steiner got the recliner on for the win. He says he's going to take him out if DDP doesn't come out here. He says, oh, kill him, and then I'm going to kill you. You kill him, I'll kill you. Hugh Morris is like, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. And then they brawl outside the ring, and Hugh Morris gets taken through the crowd by DDP, and that's it. It's the end of that. Really glad I'm going to be done with this viewing soon. Even though it's been fun, I may do a countdown about my favorite things in WCW's last year. Anyway, let me know what you thought in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm Charm Ritlin. I'll see you soon.